Welcome to the Write Your Own Story podcast. I'm your host, Betsy Leonidas, and the founder of the Write Your Own Story company. Girl, I can tell you right now, you are definitely enough. Here we value service, sisterhood, connection, laughter, and that super genuine, keep it real, tell you like it is honesty. My hope is at the end of each episode, you realize you can do whatever it is you dream about and that you are not alone with what you struggle with. I'm hoping that you are snapping and clapping and hell yes in your way through each one of these episodes. So if this tracks with you, let's get started. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Write Your Own Story podcast. I'm your host, Betsy Leonidas, and I am thrilled to be here today with the author of the book, Little Avalanches, Becky Ellis. Becky, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Betsy. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. I'm just going to jump all over the place, but as I was telling you off camera before we started recording, I ripped through this book. It was so beautifully written. I was like so deeply connected to each character. It was such an important story. There were things for me to learn. I mean, truly, like this pulled at me in so many different meaningful ways that like, I just truly, one, I love the message, which is why I wanted to have you on the show, but I'm like, Kevin needs to read this book. It was wonderful. So congratulations on a fantastic book.
Oh, thank you. That's so good to hear. One never knows how a book or a piece of writing is going to land on a reader, and that's really meaningful to hear. So thank you.
Oh, well, I absolutely mean it. And I totally understand. It's very vulnerable to be a creative and put things out into the universe that is your work. So I fully empathize, sympathize, all of the things. So I like to start off each episode with an intention. And my intention for this one, and we will get into the book and what it's all about, but this is a really beautiful story about your father who came home as a war veteran with PTSD and how he was able to show up as a parent, as a partner, etc. But this is really from the perspective of you as a child. And what I really want women, I think so many of us have, in our generation, have been raised by parents that also have suffered from trauma. And it's just one of the impacts is emotional immaturity. And so, helping women find the courage to really find peace after being raised in an emotionally unavailable home, if you will. I think, a lot of people have varying degrees of that and feel that as an adult. So
right,
I think this
agree.
is, it's such an important topic, and it's, a heavy one, but also an important one. So I would love if you could start off and just give us a rundown, a quick bio of who you are and what you're up to, so everyone gets to know you a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. I'm a mom. I have 3 daughters. I'm a partner. I'm a daughter myself. My mom is still alive. She's 94.
Oh my gosh,
my
cool.
dad, yeah. We just celebrated her birthday 2 weeks ago. And my father was a combat sergeant in World War II, but never talked about it ever until he turned 89. And what else about me? I worked in publishing for 25 years. I kind of was a marketer and seller of other people's beautiful books. And now I have one of my own that that I've written. It took me about 10 years to get there, but I wanted it to be the best book and best story it could be.
I absolutely think you nailed it. So that is my first question, because you had mentioned in the book that you were in publishing. So that's really interesting to hear that you were on the marketing and sales side, which probably is interesting perspective. But what made you actually want to write a book?
When I went to college, I studied English literature. At first, I had no idea what I wanted to study. I was just expected to go. And I really fell in love with reading and writing in college. And I thought, I want to write a story, but I had no idea what it was. And so I got into publishing so I could kind of learn the business and the business of writing. And I did. And then I, got sidetracked with sales and marketing and being successful in that and raising a family and all the things that we kind of focus on when the time is right in our life.
Yes.
And this was always brewing in me, like, what do I want to write? What am I supposed to write? And I did write a novel. I would consider it women's fiction, but it is my drawer book. It belongs in a drawer. It's never coming out of the drawer. It's going to live there.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. You have a hidden book?
I do. I wrote 3 drafts of it, but it's not good. It's really not good.
Are you sure it's not good? Because the book you wrote and published is really good.
I know. I'm sure it's not good. I'll write another good book, but not that one. That was my practice book.
Practice book? Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when my father turned 89, I mean, this is part of my story, is he came to me And over a tuna sandwich one day, he asked if I had any issues to clear up. And I had a ton of issues to clear up with him.
Yeah.
And I had actually just started to wonder if I should put that other book away or start something new. And he started telling me his story. And I thought, I have to write my own story. Like my
Oh,
own story is a story I was meant to write.
I have
Yeah.
full body goosebumps. I'm telling you, the
Yeah.
universe works in amazing ways, and women's intuition to just like have that absolute clarity that you're like, this is it. I feel this in every
Yeah.
fiber of my body. Oh, that is
Yes.
unbelievable. So,
Yeah.
I want to kind of dive into the book, but before we get into the characters and just give everyone sort of like, to walk them through all the things that made you want to write a book, sort of what is your hope? We talked a little bit before we started recording, and I was just so moved about how you shared about what your hope or your intention was in writing the book.
Yeah, so it's complex and it's multi-leveled, but one of my intentions was nobody's really writing about what happens when soldiers come home and try to raise families. And
Mm-hmm.
people aren't also like children don't really have a voice, it seems like in
It's true.
trauma. They experience a lot of secondary trauma. And I had this opportunity. I'll share this little story with you. I had this opportunity right when the book came out to do a TV segment, and I knew it was only 3 minutes. And I thought, how in the heck am I going to explain this super complex story in 3 minutes? But I thought, I'm going to try because I have this opportunity. And the person interviewing me is really professional person, but the first thing she said was, so your father was really abusive and it was really hard on you and your mom and your brother and your sister. And it felt like such an attack on my dad that I kind of
Yeah,
froze. And what
totally.
I wanted to say was we were all suffering, but I
Mhm.
didn't. But I got through it. Anyway, the point is
Three
I sat
minutes
in my
is so much pressure.
it's so much pressure. I sat in my car afterwards and had a good cry in the parking lot. And then I got myself home and cried a little more and called my sister.
Yeah.
And she said, Becky, you're trying to do something really hard. And I said, well, I know, but I should be able to do it. She said, no, no, you're trying to break a taboo that's old as humans. And I said, well, I don't
Oh,
see that. And she said, it's children speaking.
oh my God.
And I was,
I am head to toe goosebumps. It's so
yeah,
true. Children don't, they don't have the voice. And also, it's tricky the emotional abuse versus physical, tangible abuse. You hear
yeah,
so many people who are emotionally abused so confused because it's not the physical bruises that are, that we know as society to be like, that is wrong. I should not be hit. But to be so emotionally go through all the things
right.
that you went through, it's
Right.
hard
And
to.
so one of my intentions, back to the intention of like why I
Yes.
wanted to write it, was I wanted to give children a voice.
Oh, that's
So I
so
wrote the
beautiful.
first part from the child's perspective. And I also wanted to, there's this point in the story that was so unbelievable that my father went to when he finally started telling me his story, that I finally, for the first time, saw him for who he was. Not who I needed him to be as a child or who I wanted him to be as a grandfather, because I had expectations and desires for who I wanted him to be and how I wanted him to show up at Grandparents' Day at school. Wear the
Absolutely.
thing, say the thing, do the thing, but he's
Show up.
totally unpredictable. Show up.
Yeah.
But he came to a point in his story that for the first time, I saw him for who he really was. And I think it's really rare that we see our parents or our partners or our children for who they are
Yeah.
without our needs and desires for who we want them to be or who we need them to
Wow.
be.
That is
And
incredibly
so,
powerful.
yeah, and that was so life-changing for me that I wanted to share that with other people and kind of show them a way to get there and to do that.
Well,
That's one main reason.
and that is profound, and it's tricky because when we think about relationships, some of us, some people can really put their needs on the back burner, especially women. We just are people pleasers and serve. And there are moments where empathy, what I'm kind of learning in all these conversations and in my own journey is that like empathy is such a gift. Those of us who are highly empathetic often have learned it the hard way and sort of had to read the room, et cetera, et cetera. But you can have empathy and compassion for someone, and their behavior can still not be acceptable. That doesn't mean that they don't
Right.
love you or that you don't love them, but also, I don't know, it's tricky to like separate your needs and who they really are and what they've been through, and to realize, I guess it's kind of the realization that his behavior really had nothing to do with you.
Exactly. It had
Yeah.
nothing to do with me. And
No.
once I understood his history and his story, I could put that together because as a child and a woman, even we all little girls, all women, probably all boys and men too, we want our fathers to love us. We want our
Yes.
parents to love us.
Yes.
And I wanted that so much. I thought my love could heal him or something.
I think a lot of
But
people feel that way. Yeah.
yeah, but he was a separate person apart from me with his own experience. And I'm able to see my children that way now too. And that's even harder for me, I've got to say. It's super
Yeah.
hard. But
Oh,
when I'm able to get there, like they are having their own experience
yes.
and they are becoming the people that they are. And when I'm able to see them that way, I'm able
Mhm.
to pull back on my desires for what I want for them.
I 100% agree. It is so hard to, we've lived so much more than them, and we see the writing on the wall, or like I'm in the middle of teenagerhood where they're trying on all these personalities. And I'm like, I know you so well. And this one definitely doesn't fit, but I have to weather this awkward, moment that often is in public where I'm like, this isn't you, but sure, let's try this one on. And, they have to figure it out for themselves. But oh my God, it is so hard. Okay,
It's
I
so
want to
hard.
take a step back because I have some questions about how all this affects you as a mother, as everything. But I just to set the stage for everyone listening who hasn't had the chance to read the book. So, can you give us just a couple of anecdotes from the book so that people can understand what childhood was like for you, or so you could give that voice to the child again?
Sure, yeah. She's always with me. I call her little
Right?
Becky. Yeah,
Totally.
yeah, yeah. Our younger selves are all of ourselves are with us, I think.
Absolutely. 100%.
So to kind of give listeners an idea of what my childhood was like, my father was really unpredictable and he put us
Mhm.
in dangerous situations and inappropriate situations. And it
Yes.
was from his PTSD. He did things like he would never let us quit anything. So when I learned to water ski, everyone would think, oh, that's such a joy and a privilege. And he thought so too. But the relentless way that he taught me was horribly traumatic for my
Yes.
6-year-old self. I was still
Mhm.
wearing footy pajamas and had my baby teeth when he's like,
Yeah.
it's your birthday. You're learning to ski today. You're 6. It's time. And he
Mhm.
dragged me behind the boat over and over and over until I could stand up. And he would not let me quit because to
Yeah.
him, if you quit, you're dead.
Yeah.
And at that time, I didn't understand that. But he
Yeah.
wanted us to be people that would survive. Like his
Yes.
PTSD was he put us in these situations so we would learn to survive. So we would be tough as nails. So if we were ever on a battlefield, which the Nazis weren't coming to,
Nope.
you know, I think I lived south of San Francisco at the time with him or visited him there. They weren't coming and we didn't need this, but he felt that we did. And he had me get my teeth drilled without Novocaine so I could have a high pain tolerance, stuff like that.
Yes. I mean, that I can't imagine as a little girl, because our parents are there to keep us safe and to put us in those situations. And it sounds like, as you're being drug around the water, or, you're in the dentist chair, you didn't have a voice. But I can also imagine that in his mind, he lost so many people in his I'm not good at this, so please help me. The language for like his group, and it wasn't a troop. It wasn't, there were like 3 different classifications. Anyway, all the men that he was
His unit.
responsible, his unit, that's the word. I'm sorry. But it's just like, he watched lose so many people. The thought of losing you was probably beyond terrifying. And so he was like, you need to be able to survive everything. Oh
Right.
my goodness.
And when I talked to him later, he was able to explain that to me that he put himself in dangerous situations over and over, and he put his family in dangerous situations to prove to himself that we would survive because
Wow.
his unit had a 300% mortality rate
Yes.
or
Literally,
casualty rate. Yeah.
yes. They sent in 3 waves of men, and like truly only he and maybe one other, I think it was, survived. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also to have the fear of like, he couldn't explain as to why he survived, like I can only imagine if he knew the formula. I don't know. I truly have. So it was absolutely eye opening. So you had an older brother. What was your relationship like with your brother, and how did you guys experience that together?
Hmm. I feel like I couldn't have survived without my older brother, Martin. And he's still
Yeah.
so dear to me. I get choked up sometimes when I think about how,
Hmm.
we were always together. He's the only person that understood my experience, because although his experience was different than mine, we
Hmm.
experienced everything together.
Yes.
He was treated a little bit differently than I was by my father, because
Hmm.
he was a boy and I was a girl, and he had different expectations. So it was different in that way. But what we were actually enduring was the same thing, because we were always together.
Yes. Have you guys ever
Yeah.
had those conversations about like certain, like a water skiing incident, or and that you both interpret it differently, but realizing that it was not okay? Like I think about siblings, and like when you have conversations, their recount of childhood can sometimes feel so different, even though you shared the whole thing together.
Yeah. I think my brother and my sister Shayna, who's 6.5 years younger than me from a different mother, but when she came along, we were together a lot. She didn't go to my mother's, but we experienced my father together. I
Yes.
think that their experience was similar enough that now in adulthood, when I think back on it, and I've had them read Little Avalanches so that I was sure that this really happened, right? Because
Totally.
it's so in my memory, and they're like, "Oh yeah,
Hmm.
that happened,"
Hmm.
And they might remember it, different aspects of it. Like we had a black lab, and the black lab really isn't in my story, but my dad wasn't kind to, his name was Rufus. And my brother has, I think, trauma around my dad's treatment of our dog, where for
Yeah.
some reason I didn't. So Rufus isn't as much in my memory as he is in my brother's. So little things like that are different. But I think that, we all endured it together and
Yeah.
have
Ab-
slightly different
Absolutely.
lens, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm so grateful that you had your brother as a support, because I've seen it go both ways, where it drives the children apart or it bonds them together. I don't know. I guess there's no good way to cut it, but I'm glad that you two had each other. Now I'm thinking
Yeah.
about your mom. So your parents were divorced, and your mom, was she really your anchor? Like, is she I mean, I know that she was a single parent raising two kids. And, I know that your dad was kind of tricky in the divorce process and thereafter and their relationship was complicated from what I understand from the book. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but what was that like, your relationship with your mom, and coming home to her or having to separate from her?
She was definitely a comfort, and I don't think I would even be without her stability. She was the stable source in my life. However, as you can see from the very first pages when we're standing in the entryway, I so desperately want her to have power and voice, and she doesn't with my father. And at that time in our culture, women didn't.
Yes.
My parents went through a custody battle. Women weren't allowed to wear pants to court in the
I will let
late
everyone
60s.
read that part, but that part of the book was wild. It was
Yeah.
unbelievable. Yeah,
Yeah.
truly. No pants allowed. It's just, isn't that wild that truly
Yeah.
your outfit was dictated?
Yeah.
Oh, my
So
goodness.
so so my mother, even though she tried really hard to stand up to my father, she just didn't have the power. It's not that she didn't have the courage. She definitely had the courage to leave him, which I think was probably one of the hardest things she did in life.
Yeah.
But I wanted her as a young girl, even as a woman, I still want her to have more power and more voice in her life.
Mm,
So I still kind of go a little bit head to head with her and
yeah.
challenge her on that. Yeah.
Well, it's not
Yeah.
like that sounds like a mother-daughter relationship right there.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh my goodness. Are you like me and taking at least an hour to plan your meals every week and then to grocery shop on top, only to find out that I throw away half of it because I didn't have it in me to season and chop and prep night after night? It's so embarrassing and I feel awful about it. Are you also like me and worry about if any of the things I buy are healthy enough for me and the family? Well, let me tell you about Hungry Root. Hungry Root is my partner for healthy living. Hungry Root helps me save time, save money. I shop sustainably, and I eat what makes me feel my absolute best. Their mission is to make it easier for more people to eat healthy and feel great every day. Some of my very favorite aspects of Hungry Root are healthy meals in 10 minutes or less. I mean it. No chopping, no seasoning ever. They do it all for you. Honestly, full stop. This is my very, very favorite thing. Every meal is so easy to put together. Often they have steamer bags for vegetables and all sorts of great microwave options too. They also give you healthy snacks and pantry supplies my kids and I both love. They're whole, trusted ingredients, which makes me feel like a great mom because I actually know that I'm putting good things in the pantry and in the fridge. Personalized recommendations based on your goals. Mine is heart healthy, and it ships to me on my schedule. The best part is also less food waste. No more throwing food out each week, which feels amazing. All you have to do is take their super simple quiz and share your preferences, goals, must-haves, and they'll recommend a plan for you and just fill your fridge with food you love. You could be like me and let them surprise you with meals each week, or you can go in and adjust each week before they actually send it to you. And let me tell you, they love your feedback. This is the one thing I actually do. I'll go in there and I'll tell them to send me more of a certain meal or less of a certain snack because we didn't really care for it. One simple click and your order is adjusted. Hungry Root is so much more than a meal kit. They send full-size groceries, which is so much better than pre-portioned package you get with your meal kits. Honestly, couldn't be happier. Use your code WriteYourOwnStory40 for 40% off your first delivery plus a free gift for life. Use code WriteYourOwnStory40 or just click the link in the show notes for 40% off your first delivery plus a free gift for life. 40% off is huge. The free gift for life promotion is a choice of free cookie dough for life, free veggies for life, or free protein for life. For life means the length of your subscription. Honestly, guys, I love Hungry Root so much. It saves my butt every single week, and I could not recommend it enough. Don't forget, use the code WriteYourOwnStory40 or just click the link in the show notes. And I truly would you come home and share with your mom the things that would happen, or would you kind of keep those to yourself to keep her protected, kind of?
Well, so as you read, she was exhausted. She worked.
Yes.
She was a nurse and she worked all the time trying to support my brother and I because my father was also a doctor. And when they were married for about 15 years and before my brother and I were born. They lasted
Okay.
2 years after I was born. But so she worked for him. So she didn't have all her hospital experience anymore. So when she left him, she had to start over. And when you start over as a nurse, at least back then, you work the night shift or the swing
Yeah.
shift and you don't make much money. So she was exhausted. So I would come home and tell her stories, just try to get her attention,
Yeah.
because I wanted
Yes.
her to not send me there anymore. Like,
Yeah.
don't send me to my father's. And she didn't want to either,
Yeah.
but she
Oh, I
had
can
to.
imagine. You're right. Legally, right?
Yeah.
That is such a complicated scenario. I can only imagine what she was experiencing as well as a mother, to have to
Mm.
send you guys into these experiences where she could only imagine what would happen. Now, your father
Yeah.
remarried and had his Judy, was that her name?
Yes. My stepmother.
Yes. And tell me about your relationship with Judy. And I think, for all of the co-parents out there or for all the divorced kids out there, just for people to relate to you and Judy.
Yeah, Judy was really young. My dad was about 45 and she was 19, 20 when they met and married shortly after. So she was super fun. And I've got to say, I visited my father only 2 or 3 times in my life when he did not have a partner. And it was even more scary. Having a
Yeah.
woman around
Yeah.
made it a much safer situation. And
Yeah.
so I loved having Judy there. But Judy was also a true hippie and she smoked a lot of weed and she got
Mm-hmm.
into drugs, hard stuff. And so
Mm.
she wasn't really appropriate and
Yeah.
probably wasn't really safe, but she made my father feel safer, if that
I
makes sense.
It makes total sense. Absolutely. I think, so often we see people level up when other people are around, and, whether it is true safety or not, it is perceived safety, which always feels like relief, I think. Oh my
Yes.
goodness. So
Yes.
she
And
was like,
she took some of she was in the struggle with us. And she often, when there are more people, there's more to absorb, whether it's anger or danger or whatever. She was an adult who was absorbing some of that. So,
yeah, absolutely. A bit of a buffer. And
yes,
so, but then they did not stay married, correct?
they did not. No.
Yeah. That's got to be also very hard. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. I missed
Um,
her when my father left her. I missed her dearly,
I
deeply.
can, I can imagine. I can imagine. So now you had mentioned that you really didn't want to go. Did you know right from the start that the way that your dad treated you was inappropriate or not safe or?
Not really, because it's all that I knew. I
Yes.
think it's when I was like 8, 9, 10, I started to be like, oh, like they didn't have to learn to water ski, or they're not at home learning to shoot a gun. They're having a barbecue and swimming,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And
Right.
there were good times with my dad too. Once I did learn to water ski, it became fun.
Yeah. But
But
sometimes that can make it even more confusing, don't you think?
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think it was around that age, 7, 8, 9, that I kind of clued in that other kids weren't having the same experience that I was having. But before that, I think we don't know.
Yeah, truly. This is all you knew, to your point. And I think a lot of people can identify with that. And now, when you're 7, 8, and 9, and you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't seem quite right. This doesn't match. Is that the point where you're like, I really don't want to go anymore? Or was that when you were older?
I didn't want to go sometimes because I wanted to sell Girl Scout cookies with the troop,
Yeah.
or I wanted to go to a birthday party with that my friend's a slumber party or something. So I
Hmm.
didn't want to go for those reasons. But my father was also unkind towards my mother. And I would get really
Hmm.
defensive of my mother and really angry with my dad. And
Yeah.
so when he started into that, I didn't want to go.
Yeah. I can
And when
only
it felt
imagine.
unsafe, I didn't want to go. So there were a lot
Mm.
of reasons I didn't want to go, I guess.
Right. But you ended up having to go though until you were 18, right?
Yes, I did. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. And I can imagine the anxiety and the stress and the anticipation of the weekends or the holidays that you had to go knowing what was coming. And then I can imagine, and I'm curious to ask, as you have an adult relationship with your dad, did you have that similar anxiety and, just kind of like hypervigilance, knowing that something was coming when he would come to stay with you and your family?
This is a great question because my sister tells me she thinks I'm a formidable person. And I'm like, I am so sweet and kind. I am not formidable. And I truly am. But
You seem to very much so be.
I do have this side of me when I can turn into what I call Sergeant Boswell,
I love it.
and I can be really tough and really strident and effective and competent and capable and all the things. And I think my sister says you're more like dad than any of the rest of us because
Mm.
she remembers me standing up to him more than anybody else. There's a scene in the book when I tell him I'm not visiting you anymore if you call my mom a bitch one more time. And nobody else would have done that. I was kind of what he called the mouthy, hysterical one. And I think I was just copying his behavior. But as an
Interesting.
adult, I would stand up to him. However, when I had children, I wanted the kind, compassionate Becky to always be present
Hmm.
unless they needed defending. And so when my dad came, what I feel like I had this really carefully curated life, and I thought I had escaped my childhood.
Yes.
And I hadn't. wonderful vacations and nice cars and granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, the whole thing.
Right.
And my dad would come to visit, and I would feel like I was holding the whole thing together with Scotch tape, that it wasn't really real, because I would be reminded of where I came from, what I was up against. But I enjoyed time with him too. It's that
Yeah.
paradox,
It all, yes. Yes.
of
The dualities of
he's
life.
yes, he always brought that forward. And yeah, I would get nervous and anxious and that sometimes. And other times I was just like, fuck it, I don't care. Like
Yeah,
he's gonna just do
totally.
his thing and I'm just gonna keep my kids away from it, you know.
Yep. So that is my next question is, as you show up as a mama bear, and do you feel like you were just like, I'm going to give them everything I didn't have. I'm, going to be the perfect mom and we're going to do everything just right. Or do you or did the kind of like you said, the sergeant stuff kind of come in because you also had that fear of like, I need you to be able to survive what I survived kind of thing.
God, we all try so hard to be the parent that we want to be and the best that we can be. I really think we do. We try so hard. And I was trying really hard to be that loving, kind, compassionate mom. And I think that I was. I mean, I snuggled with my kids every night and read them stories and fixed their boo-boos. And, when kids always wanted to come over to our house to have sleepovers because I made my kids hot cocoa with whipped cream every single morning.
Oh my
Nobody
gosh.
ever did that for me, And
Right.
so,
Nope. Yeah.
so I was all of that. And my children now will say I was also probably one of the strictest parents because I didn't want them to get into drugs. And I wanted them to do well in school. And I am sure I have this side of me that's super serious and demanding, I guess. Even though I don't think I'm super demanding.
I don't think you're super demanding. I mean, I think that I can relate so much, truly. Like I want to be and am the warmest, kindest, snuggliest mom. But there are moments where I'm like, wait, but you may not do drugs because I've seen the effect that it has on people. Like, I want you're going to have to toughen up in certain areas. And this is for real. Like you have, first of all, I think to your point, everyone is doing the best they can.
Yeah.
And I think it is such a gift to children for them to see how hard you're trying. And,
yeah. I can tell you the story this conversation I just had with my oldest daughter, who's now 30, and she's an anesthesiologist. She's brilliant and lovely and an amazing human being. I wish I were her, actually. And she's so tender and kind, also just a joyful person. But we were talking about my parenting a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about drugs. And she said, I would never do drugs because you told us if you ever found out we even tried drugs, you would be on us like flies on shit. And you would follow us around school and you would get a little chair and wait outside our classroom and you'd walk us to our next class and then you'd walk us to the next and you'd be sure we never did it again. And I'm like,
I'm using that.
God, I said that.
I love
like,
that.
That's kind of harsh.
Yeah, it is. But that's real crystal clear. You're not messing around on this. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, and she said to me, I always had in my mind you sitting outside my classroom in high school, and that would be the most humiliating thing ever. So I never touched the stuff.
Oh my God, that is unbelievable. And I feel like every parent has that version of that story. And it is so hard to separate, who you are as a parent and how you want to show up versus what's kind of trudging along behind you from the past. I think everybody feels this way, but honestly, I'm not going to lie. I might use that. That sounds amazing.
Well, that's very Sergeant Boswell of me.
Yeah. Well, I can think of a lot more things that are more sergeanty than that, but I think you're right. It's a perspective. Every parent has it. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah. So your father, finally comes to you in the later part of his life on one of your visits. And, was it sort of like, okay, before I get to this next question, when he would come to visit, was it like we were dancing around something, or you were like, this is just how we operate? This is it? Because I'm curious as to what made him say, is there anything that we need to talk about?
That's such a great question. And people have asked me that. And we were just dancing around everything. My father wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
talk about the past, not 5 years ago, not 5 minutes ago. I had tried to talk to him about the war in my 20s. There was no way. I saw other people try to talk to him. There was no way he was going to talk about it. And when he asked me, we were having a tuna sandwich, and he asked if I had any issues. I thought, what is he talking about? Like, he's staying in my house in the guest room. Did I like not leave towels or something? Like, does he think I'm passively aggressively doing something that just happened? And I looked at him, and he was so, he was 89, and I just saw his age on him kind of for the first time. He was always this strong man. I think our parents sometimes get etched into our minds at a certain age. And so writing about him as a young man was super easy for me because he is etched in my mind as so powerful and strong. And I looked across the kitchen, and he was hunched over, and his hands were shaky, and his hair was super thin. And I'm like, I think he might be trying to clear stuff up. Like, I wonder if he feels his mortality. And he's a man that always felt his mortality. From the time he stepped onto the battlefield, he was hyper aware of his mortality. But he also is a man who I think was going to defy his mortality until he got really old. I think that was another paradox that he probably struggled with, was he knew how mortal he was, yet nothing ever killed him. So he had this sense of immortality also, in a way.
I wonder, do you
And
think any guilt carried with that too? Was that one of the things that
mm,
haunted him, that he survived versus
guilt,
no
I
one else?
think he definitely had survivor's guilt.
Yeah, gosh, I can only imagine. So, yeah, so he's
Yeah. And I
feeling his
was,
mortality.
yeah, I think that was it. Cause I asked him, is this you clearing up business, making the rounds? And he kind of nodded or something like that. And I said, well, you should talk to Shayna first because she had it the worst, my little sister, and I kind of deflected at first. And I thought, this is my chance. I want to hear about the war. That came forward for me, but was also present was, I'm not going to open up to him and tell him what my issues are until he becomes vulnerable with me. Like, no way am I laying my soul and heart out before him
Mhm.
until he does for me.
That, I think that is to have the wherewithal after all that you've experienced. But I also get, you're like, I know, like, there is very possible you're going to chop me up like chop liver if I do, because being vulnerable, was
Yeah.
so shamed, as I'm sure for you as a child. Okay. So he went first for
Yeah. And
real.
yeah. And I don't know if it was that I had the wherewithal, or I think I was just super guarded. Like, I had
Mm.
developed such an armor
Hmm.
around me in life. And it wasn't
Yes.
just towards my dad, it was towards
Sure.
everybody.
Yeah.
Probably not my children. I
Hmm.
mean,
Yes.
they were the ones that lived inside my heart for sure. But I
Yeah.
was very guarded with everybody in life. I was friendly and fun and kind and all of that, but I was super guarded. I did not talk about myself or my past or anything. I never let people really inside the inner chamber of my heart. I just
Yeah.
didn't.
My
Yeah.
gosh. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people can relate to that. Absolutely. Now, if he is opening up and being more vulnerable, and I want to dig into that, but just on the guarded part for a second, once you've had these conversations, have you been able to let people in more?
Absolutely. Yeah, because something that happened with my father, people sometimes ask me, "Did you get closure?" And in fact, my editor said, "You need to put in the book whether you got closure or not." And I didn't get closure. I was cracked open, and I
Ooh.
feel like my heart broke 1,000 times to the point where it's just broken open now, and it's not closing again. And it's hard to keep it open. I'll say that. It's super hard. it's a practice. It's a daily practice to live with an open heart, I think.
Oh, and like truly for those who have a closed heart in some way, shape, or form, because I think you explained it so beautifully. You can be an open, kind, outgoing, loving, genuine person, but still have that shell over your heart because it has just had to be closed off to be safe. How do you live with an open heart? Like, what does that feel like? Does it feel like peace? Does it feel like joy? Like, what are the thoughts that you choose again? I'm like, can you tell us how to do it?
I can say just let your heart break, be open and vulnerable, and let people break your heart over and over. And, I think when we really believe in people and then things don't go well, I think our hearts get broken. I mean, my children have broken my heart many times, but bless them for doing that. If we let our children, they will break our hearts. Everybody will break your heart if you let them. I think it's the part of the human condition. And I think it's just let them break your heart and let it stay open.
And
And
to
and
know that
that's
you'll
what
be okay.
living. Yeah. And I think that's what living with a broken heart is just letting it be broken over and over. And it is it is peaceful. There is a profound peace in it, I think,
Mm. Yeah.
because you realize you can endure it and it's
Yeah.
okay. And
And if you do have more of an open heart and it does get broken more, does it also see more beauty?
I think so. Rumi has this quote about where the wound is, the light comes in. And that's how I feel is where your heart breaks, light comes in.
That's
And
so
so I feel
beautiful.
like it's a lighter life. It's
Oh,
definitely not so heavy.
that's
You
so
know,
motivating, truly, because I think facing the things that you've had to face and having the conversations that you've had and looking at yourself as a parent and as a partner and healing yourself, a lot of people aren't brave enough to do that. But it's such incentive to hear that, to embrace the heartbreak of life, but also realize that that is where the brightest light shines as well. I think that
yeah.
that is going to help a
And in
lot of
terms of,
people.
how to do it, my work has always been finding my voice. Kind of the arc of the story is as a young child, my voice was taken away. And I think that happens to a lot of us as children because we're adaptive and we have to adapt to survive. So we lose our voice. I think it's a natural process, but then it's so hard to find it again. And for me, living with my heart open is telling the truth in a kind, compassionate way, but saying the thing. I think we all have something we're not saying.
Yes.
And if we can say the thing, that is what living with an open heart is making sure you're always saying the thing that needs to be
That
said.
that I just can feel the lift of like this damp, wet blanket, because it has to be so liberating to not have to carry the things that we all bury, to just say it with, to your point, with
Yeah.
kindness and compassion and with an open heart. Oh my
Yeah.
God, I'm going to think about this for days and days.
Yeah. It's
It's
like just
beautiful.
tell your truth. And it's kind of like with everybody, not everybody, but with many people I think we're in relationship with, there's something we're not saying. And what is that thing? And how can you say it? And
Hmm.
it is liberating because that armor is heavy,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
having an armored heart, it's heavy.
Yes. And like, if we really think, you talked about little Becky comes with you everywhere. Little Betsy comes with me everywhere too. And like,
Yeah.
if the armor, think about how heavy that is on the little versions of ourselves and the
Yeah.
teenager versions of ourselves. And, I think, gosh, just even like, if you really like think in almost like a meditative way of like lifting that armor and how freeing that feels, this gives such permission for women to explore this and to think about it. And I so appreciate your honesty that this is truly an everyday, probably moment to moment practice.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
as it relates to healing, as it relates to relationships. But I think also one of the common themes that I see with women is it's really hard for us to ask for needs. And I can speak from personal experience. When I used to, I just learning as, like an adult, as a 39-year-old, 40, now 42-year-old, I've been practicing asking for my needs for about 3 years now. and it makes me so sweaty. And if I wait and wait and wait on it, then it doesn't come out with kindness and compassion. I've held on to it for too long. Then probably Sergeant
Right.
Betsy comes out. But if I'm brave enough to say it early enough and like, and just be like, hey, this is actually how I feel, as opposed to just being like, this is terrifying. I'm not going to say it for years.
Yes.
I don't
So
know.
I
Again,
have
these are all
a
new
little
skills.
yeah, I have a little reminder, and that's this little robin's egg blue colored necklace that I wear. It's just a little stone
Oh,
around my throat chakra, and apparently that color helps open the throat chakra. So I wear that, and I haven't taken it off for like 5 years to remind myself, use your voice, use your voice, use your voice. This is what you're doing. Tell the truth.
I'm
Use your voice. Say the
literally
thing.
I'm going to go get that necklace and a turtleneck in that color and a scarf in that color and just that is so amazing and
So funny.
beautiful. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I love that. And I think we all need these little reminders, whatever it may be, and I think that those are the important things that I think women, change doesn't happen overnight. And when you have been conditioned some way
Mm-mm.
since you were a little girl, this will be a forever assignment. But you learn, I'm sure, and I can relate on certain things, you learn to love the assignment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So hopping back to your conversation with your father, I cannot imagine, I would have started sweating immediately if someone, like this moment that you've been waiting for, that you're like, is this really happening? And oh my God, I'm guarded and afraid to go first. And it sounds like it was just layer after layer after layer. Can we, because one, I want to absolutely honor your father and what he's been through. Talk a little bit, because also I genuinely need more education on this, just kind of painting the picture of what he's been through and what it's like to come home and sort of the lack of resources. Like, where does your empathy really draw from to really paint what is it like for a veteran?
Well, I have a data point of one, which is my father.
It's
So
more
I
than I've
will
got.
say that. Yeah. And I never really identified as being in a veteran family because my father never talked about being a veteran. And he never went to a veterans group or associated with other veterans, none of it. He wanted to be as far away from that as possible when he came back. So, and I think there are so many people out there like me. Since the book released in March, I've met so many people who had a parent, a father who wouldn't talk about it. And so they didn't really identify as a veteran family either. But what I can say is when I heard about my father's experience, and he was on the battlefield for 172 consecutive days. And his division, the 104th Infantry, was on the battlefield for 195 consecutive days, and he lasted 172 of those. That's the longest any division was in consecutive battle in World War
Wow.
II.
Oh my
And
God.
so that's a lot of trauma. And he
Yes.
saw a lot of people lose their lives. And one thing he told me was, because I kept wanting to know how he felt. Like,
Yeah.
I wanted to
Yeah.
get in the feeling part because
Sure.
I had already read a ton of books and watched a ton of movies in my 20s and 30s and early 40s, trying to figure out who my father was and what his experience was like. And none of them really got to the feeling of what it was like to be there. And he said, Becky, we were trained not to feel. He said, the training of a military is to dehumanize you. You cannot run into machine gun fire and you cannot do what we have to do if you are not dehumanized. You have to be dehumanized. He said, it's absolutely horrible, but utterly necessary. So I think what happens is, you combat veterans especially, come home. There's no rehumanizing program. And they have been trained to be dehumanized, and they've seen the worst of humanity. And then to come back and be in a loving, kind relationship with anybody, I've got to imagine that's one of the most difficult things to do, to
Because
rehumanize yourself.
That's my question is like, so I'm sure in basic training and et cetera, and then through experience, you are put through a very specific process to dehumanize. Like there's no rehumanize, there's no support, there's no, like buffer to then just be plopped back into a world that you no longer recognize or feel a part of.
That was his experience, and that was what was happening in the 1940s when soldiers came home from World War II, and I think Vietnam might have been a little bit worse because they were treated so poorly by society. They were not well received. World War II, the idea was they were respected and appreciated, and in Vietnam, I think it was the opposite when those guys came back. And I've tried to learn a lot about this. And several months ago, I talked to a retired general of an infantry division, and he said to me, "Becky, we're actually pretty good at fighting war, but we are not that good at recovering." And he said, "We're better than we were in the 1940s, but we're worse off than we were in the 2000s." And that is about support. It's about funding of the military and where the funding is going. It's not really going into families and veteran support as much as it was in the 2000s, but there is much more now than there was in the 40s. But we can do better. We can
Yeah.
absolutely do better. We have to do better, I think.
Well, I recently turned my basement into a home gym, literally all from Amazon, and I could not be more obsessed. I got an elliptical that I actually love, a reformer that I'm obsessed with and is saving my life, and all my decor that makes it not just a home gym, but feel bougie. I mean, we're talking wallpaper accent walls and a chandelier without breaking the bank. Now I have space where me and my 4 kids can all work out together. I love Amazon because I furnish or style my home in a way that feels like such a reflection of me without having to break the bank. If you're like me and get a little bit sad, okay, maybe more than a little bit sad, when there's no package at the door, then you are my people. Also, I think we need help. But until then, visit amazon.com/shop/write your own story, or even better, click the link in the show notes and shop all my favorite finds in fashion, beauty, home decor, organization, and more. From my cart to yours, these are the treasures you don't want to miss. Well, and one of the things that really struck me in thinking about, not only obviously does he get no sort of emotional, mental, any type of like rehumanizing type of support, but there was a part in the story where like he had teeth literally fall out while he was eating something, and it took him 3 years to be able to get an appointment to get his teeth fixed through the VA. So I can imagine the physical ailments that, because the man couldn't brush his teeth for 100 and some days. So like, of course his teeth are rotting and falling out. And, just to, have balance the physical and emotional and mental, and life has, continued while they were gone. I feel like I just have this, a really, the way that you wrote it in the book and shared his experiences, you truly felt like you were there and you could feel how he had to dehumanize, but also like you as a human attach so much emotion to it. The way that you shared that and wrote that was beautiful and just incredibly interesting, truly. And then to hear the stories of just with his family before he even was in relationship with your mother or the woman before him or any after, but like trying to even just recalibrate with his family sounded so challenging.
Absolutely. And he did get to the feeling of it with me after we were talking for about a
Oh,
year.
yeah.
And so all those emotions that are written in the book, because I did write it from this, the second part is first person, his perspective, like a journal format of being in the trenches, basically. And he did get to that. So I did layer that into the book. At one time, he's so far disassociated, he just doesn't even care if he lives or dies anymore. He just knows he's going to die,
Yes.
and
That
that's heartbreaking.
truly. I can't, I mean, it's so unrelatable to have that radical acceptance of I'm going to literally run to the green door, because I've fully
Yeah.
accepted that I am going to die. Like I can't imagine. And, we think about hypervigilance and touched on that a bit about, as a child to experience all this emotional turmoil of sometimes he's wonderful and sometimes I'm in physical or emotional danger. And like, just that those of us who experienced it have our heads on swivel as an adult, to have the depth that he's had. I can only imagine how scary it is to close your eyes at night, or, how to ever bring your heart rate down, or I don't know, or how to ever
Right.
crack open your heart. I don't mean to laugh, but just, it
No.
makes me like take that kind of breath, because it seems almost impossible.
Right, right. And that's how our veterans, that's what they're facing when they come home, I think. And that's why the veteran suicide rate is higher than the normal suicide rate, and I've thought a lot about what can we do? What can we do? And my mission is to get people to start talking and have the conversations, the deeply connective, hard conversations, and to try to get veterans to start talking. And I was talking to this group of Marines, which they're a really badass group of
Yeah.
people.
I
And
can
most of
only
them were
imagine.
in their 70s, but most of them were Vietnam vets. And they were still scary, badass guys.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
There was a woman there too, but
That a girl.
I was talking to them and really encouraging them to share themselves and share their stories. And one of them said he had a question, and his question was, do you really think anyone can understand us? Like it was a really, and my answer is no, I don't think so. But I think we can try. I think we can hold compassion and empathy, and we can try to understand your experience, because if 1%, if somebody out there can try and can understand your experience and can feel you re-experiencing what you experience, then it is worth it. Then that's where the healing begins.
Absolutely.
I think we talk a lot about wanting to be seen. Like we want to be seen and we want to be heard. But even more than that, I think we want to be felt. And there was this moment with my father where I could feel him talking to me. And that is really, I feel you feel me, is where true healing and connection, I think, happens.
Which
It's
I
about,
wonder if that is what fueled him. This wasn't a one and done conversation. You mentioned that it was even over the next year, if not more. And for him to experience that feeling of you understanding and feeling him and connecting with him that way, then it almost feels like his heart was then craving that.
yeah, every time he talked to me until the end of his life, he said, "Oh, I got to tell you one more thing," or "I want to make sure you really understand this," or something. And he wanted to talk to me about it every time.
Yeah. And let's talk about then, understanding and healing and taking care of them is critically important for them and for the veteran community. But then when we think about the ripple effect of the family and the generations to come, like this is in service of so many people within the lineage of these families.
Absolutely. 100% it is. And we feel so separate from it now. But when we look back to the 1940s, 30% of men went to war. And so that impacted a lot of families. That maybe your grandfather was in a war and you think it doesn't affect you, but it did affect your parent, and that's affecting you,
Yep. Yes.
And I think people have started to recognize that, which I think is great. So it's millions and millions of people.
Right.
There are 18 million veterans out there right now, I think. And so if they all have a family of 4 or something, that's a lot of people currently,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. So, when you're saying that your hope is that people are having these conversations, whether they be veteran conversations or conversations with anyone in their life, like you said, to say the thing. And how do you get brave enough to have that conversation? Because like you were saying, your dad even started it and you were like, you go first. Like, because it's terrifying to crack open your heart and be like, this is really what happened to me. How do you encourage people to get brave about that?
Yeah, I actually have this 10 tips on my website, this
Okay.
just download freebie thing
I
for
love
10
it.
tips for having difficult conversations because I get this a lot. Like, God, my
Yeah.
mom won't stop talking about the broken furnace. Like, I really
Mhm.
want to have a conversation with her, but she is fixated on her furnace,
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of strategies, but I think a place to start is go slow and start
Mm.
surface level and find a way in.
Mm.
Don't expect a lot. Don't put your expectations down.
Mm.
Stay super curious. I think if we stay curious, it keeps us out of our defensiveness.
Yeah.
And another super important thing is to see them for who they are, apart from yourself.
Yeah.
And I think if you can see yourself apart from the other person also, it makes it easier to open your heart,
Yeah.
you know?
And
Yeah. I mean, those are just a couple little things,
I
but
those are really great because I can imagine that if someone is like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to have this conversation. And then it's like, you have such a notion built up in your head. There's so much adrenaline going into it because you feel like this is the bravest thing you've ever done. And you're fully also embracing for it to like not go great. And it's like, if you just scratch the surface and, like to your
yeah.
point, like take it easy, be curious, be open, separate from it. I think that
And
that makes,
yeah. And also get their buy in. Like, there's something I want to talk to you about. Do you have time? Can we have
mm,
tea?
yeah,
Get their buy in. Like, yeah, sure. I'll do that.
yeah.
And then to be vulnerable. Like, sometimes the way I do it, especially with my kids, is to say, there's something I want to talk to you about, and I
Hmm.
don't know how, because I've never
Ooh,
said this before. So it might come out sideways. It might get really messy. So please just bear with me because I will try to get there as best I can.
I
And
love
that's the
that.
truth. Like, you're
Yes.
just telling the truth.
Yeah.
So I would say just start with sit for a minute and figure out what the truth really is for you and start with that. Like, I am scared to death to talk to you about this. I don't know
Yeah.
why, or it's because X, Y, and Z, but I am terrified.
Yeah. God,
Will you
that's
bear with
beautiful.
me?
And what a beautiful gift to give to your children to be like, one, to encourage them to always have conversations, but two, to just embrace showing up messy.
Yeah.
I think that is such permission that everybody needs that didn't necessarily exist before. And I think that is so wonderful. And for people who don't feel like they have the opportunity to have that conversation, or parents have passed, to your point about some of the people in your life, how do you encourage them to open their heart and heal without that kind of conversation available to them?
I think we all have somebody around us. We all have people around us. And at a very human level, I think once we open up and are vulnerable like that, we get to experience the best of humanity, you
Mm,
know?
yeah.
So I think there's someone, whether it's a neighbor or a friend or someone in community, I think when you start a conversation with, I want to say something and I don't know how to do it. I talk to my children like that now. I didn't before and I do now. I'm like, parenting is improv. You're
Totally.
like, this is my first mom job. And so could you bear with me for a minute? I'm not quite sure how to say this. I might mess the whole thing up.
Truly. I always tell my kids, I'm like, I'm still looking for the manual until I find it. Please bear with me because I sure love you and I'm trying my best. But oh boy, do I
Yeah.
mess things up. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
So what has writing this book, how has this transformed you, or what has this experience been like for you? Transform feels like a giant word. Don't feel the pressure of that. But like how has this book affected you?
Gosh, I mean, writing memoir is transformative.
Mm.
Writing your own story
Mhm.
is transformative, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm a different person. Well, I'm the same person, but I have such different perspective now that I'm on the other side of it. And the process of talking to my father and going through all that, I know so much more about myself because it required such deep excavation to really
Ooh.
get to the truth,
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know?
yes, absolutely. What were some of those deeper truths that you like didn't even know were in there?
Hmm. That's a really good question. And my mind has to go back over the book for a minute.
Take your time.
I think one of the deeper truths was there were moments that I hated my father,
Mm-hmm.
as a kid.
Yes, I can imagine. Yes.
It's hard to admit that, it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to sit with that. And it, in this really weird way, it's hard to even admit I had experienced trauma.
Mm-hmm.
There are moments still where I'm like, well, it wasn't that bad, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
in fact, when you started the recording and started talking about something, I thought, oh God, I was really traumatized. Like even now, it takes me a minute to think, yeah, I guess I was, because we survive it and we think, you know what, we're okay. I am okay. We're all okay. But that was a hard thing to come to terms with. That was a deeper truth to
Truly.
realize that.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. And I think it is such a reflection of the human condition to survive that our brain has this way of talking ourselves into safety in the scariest of scenarios. And so it is hard to reconcile the facts of what happened, the emotions that were there, but what the brain does to survive. And I just so appreciate you sharing that, because your vulnerability gives so many women the permission to peel back the layers and to see their truth for what it is and to love themselves for it. And I think
Yeah.
that what a gift for you to share that. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Healing is
Something
hard.
else, it's so hard.
It's so
Something
hard.
else that it's so hard. Something else that happened while writing the book, one of the deeper truths was I didn't want to write the book from any kind of point of anger. I wanted to be really fair. There's a thing in writing called being a just and fair God on the
Ooh,
page, which is
interesting.
essentially giving everybody their reasons for doing what they do.
Yeah.
And even murderers have their reasons.
Yeah.
And in murder mysteries, that character's given their reasons. So in writing this book, I really sat with the reasons that the women in the book made the choices that they did. And I didn't have the chance to talk to Judy because she passed away about 20 years ago. But
Hmm.
I really felt into who she was. And I gave her reasons for doing what she did. And one reader said to me, there are so many different kinds of mothers in this book. Like this could be a study on motherhood
Yes.
because everybody mothered really differently. All the
Mm-hmm.
mothers in the book mothered differently.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like that was transformative, and learning to be a just and fair God on the page made me more like that in my life too.
And that is
Where,
truly a gift.
yeah,
Yeah.
where someone will cut me off in traffic and I'm like, I don't know, maybe someone's in labor in their car or they are
Right.
having a super bad day. It's all okay. Like,
Right.
whatever. It doesn't matter.
Right.
They have their reasons.
They have their reasons. I know. And that is always a tricky balance to reconcile, to be like, yes, I like, and I think that's also sometimes another survival mechanism, is that we can over reason to be like, well, the reason they're treating me this way is because this happened and that was so awful. And it's like, there's this, just this notion now of like, yes, that happened and it's still not okay. Like, but there's also radical acceptance in that as well, which is incredibly liberating.
Right. Like, it's not okay that they cut me off,
Right.
because
Right.
do that to someone else, they might kill somebody,
Truly.
like they might
Right.
hit somebody, but that's not okay. But they're going to have their reason.
Right. And
And
you're not going to carry that with you all day.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, how has your brother and sister reacted to the book?
Oh, my sister read the book in one sitting and she said she cried for several hours and then slept for a really long time.
Yeah. Sounds
And she's
cathartic.
been super supportive.
Yeah.
And my brother read the book super slowly. It's his personality. And
Yeah.
anyone who reads the book will really get a sense
I
of
get
who
it.
he is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you get it.
Mm-hmm. I
So
get it.
what he did was he would read the first paragraph of each chapter and see what it was going to be about. And then he'd put it down for a few days and remember that experience for himself. And then, because he did not want my experience to influence his, so he grounded in his own experience, and then he read mine. And he, at the end of reading the whole thing, he sent me an email of corrections, and I printed it out, and it was 2 pages long in 8-point font.
It's amazing.
To your question earlier. Yeah. To your question earlier about did he have the same experiences? But the things were not like, oh, that didn't happen. It was like, Dad's knives were not brown handled. They were black handled, and they were Mac knives. And here's a link to what they looked like in 1972, because he's so detail oriented.
Yep.
And he actually helped me a lot with getting all the gun jargon and lingo correct, because I don't own guns, but my brother does. And so he's interested in them and I'm not. So he helped me fix all that up a little bit. So it was stuff like that.
And that's so eye-opening to how two children who are very, 100% related experience things differently because of they're two different people and their, their experiences, their interpretations, what they hold on to. It literally, as you were side by side, shoulder to shoulder for so much of it, feel, think, and look different. And that is just another thing that is beautiful and complicated about humanness.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's funny. I wanted to say this earlier, but it was around how siblings talk. You said something about when siblings get together. When my brother and sister and I get together with like our kids, because they all have kids and my kids, we would say things like, oh yeah, remember the time Shayna got drunk on the boat?
Yeah.
And everyone would just kind of be like, oh shit, yeah, I remember that, or whatever. And my children who have now read the book have said, I always thought Auntie Shayna was like 21 or something when she got drunk on the boat, because you didn't let us drink. So I just kind of assumed she was old. And now they have read the story and know she was actually 5 years old when that happened.
Oh.
And they have such a deeper understanding of why I was, you don't drink till you're of age, and there's no drugs in this house, and I'll sit outside your classroom if you
sure
do drugs.
Will. I feel you.
I think it's so important for our children to know our deeper stories. And that was like, I didn't really realize until after they read the book how much more they understand me now.
This cracks open another question for me. So we're all so protective of our children, and we think about all the hard things that we've been through, which is just the part of the fabric of our story. You do such a lovely job of painting the relationship that your girls had with your dad when they were little. There's so much hand holding and they would just run over to him. And now they hear about these darker sides to him. How is that? And I know he's passed, but in terms of how they remember their grandfather or what they think, how has that been to process for them, I guess?
Well, I think, when you read the book, the entirety of it, I think readers have nothing but compassion and understanding for my father. And
Agreed.
I think that actually happens 2 pages into his story. Readers have said they're confronted with their own capacity for compassion.
Yes.
And so I think my daughters feel even closer to him. Once when I gave them the book, I gave it to them in manuscript form. And I asked them, I said, I want you to read this, but when you're done, I want us to sit down and talk about it, because I want to know how you're doing, like how it was for you. I want to make sure they're okay and all of that. And my middle daughter sat in front of me and she tried to be all, well, your transitions were interesting and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I don't want to know the technical part, sweetheart. I have a writer's group. I want to know how you feel. And she burst into tears. Immediately. And she said, I miss Grandpa.
Such compassion.
Such compassion. So I think that they are even more endeared to him now that they understand his story. And I think we try so hard to not share our stories with each other because we think we won't be loved, but I think we're going to be loved even more if we tell our whole story.
Oh, that That rings so true to me. This is truly how this podcast got started because, I was coming out of COVID. I'd be walking with girlfriends and I would just say the thing, be like, I tried Lexapro because I was just like way too anxious, and thank God I tried it and I feel so much better, et cetera, et cetera. And people would be like, oh, I need that. Just saying the thing out loud that gives other people to say the permission to say the thing out loud. And for women, especially, and everyone to be seen and heard, and for everyone's experience is valid. And that is so beautiful and gives so much permission again to all the things that we've been holding on to because we feel like it's too big and too dark and too scary to say out loud. And no one would ever be able to hold that weight because I know how heavy this feels. I could never put that weight on somebody else. But truly, there's this whole room for empathy and compassion and human connection. And like you said, an open heart, which is really what everybody deserves.
Yeah. And I think it's beautiful that you talked about you said Lexapro, I think.
Yeah.
Being on that. Because one thing I experienced when my oldest daughter went to college, she had the hardest freshman year. I mean, there's so much change for kids. And she would call home crying all the time. Did she have a wonderful time also? Yes. But she had a really hard time adjusting too. And I would just only hear from parents, oh, how's your kid? They're great. Everything's great. Everything's wonderful and fine. And I'm like, what is wrong with my kid?
Yeah, totally.
And that's actually not the case. Now that I've had 3 be freshmen, I know actually 99% of freshmen in college are struggling. Yeah. And so can we just say, oh, my daughter's struggling with this or my son's struggling with that? Can we just say the thing? So
can we just say the thing?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my God. Oh, that is so good. Just say the freaking thing. I know. And it's like, I feel like also I'm discovering in all these conversations that like perfection somehow is associated to safety, where people are like, as long as I perceive to be perfect, I'm safe. No one can criticize me. No one can not understand me. No one can judge me. And it's like, to your point of cracking open your heart, you can handle all of that. And if they do behave in that way, that has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them. So I don't know. These are all the lessons that we are all figuring out at this, at these turning points in our life. But I think they're so important to say out loud, which your book says so many things out loud, which is such a gift. And I can only imagine the experience of writing it, and continuing to talk about it, I can imagine is all the things. But I'm so grateful. I like to end every episode because I want to be mindful of time. I could literally talk to you for hours. I'm like, I'll call you after. Okay. But so much of this is also in service to women. What are your wishes for women, for our generation? And what are your wishes for future generations for women?
So I have 3 daughters. So I've thought about this a lot.
I love that.
And, like I said early on, as children, we lose our voice. And I hope women can find their voice and keep it and speak their truth. And I think if women start really doing that, I think it will not only change our lives individually and in communities, but I honestly think it would change the world.
Agreed. Oh God, head to toe goosebumps. Yes. 100 yeses. Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. And, I think that is one vulnerable, honest, open-hearted moment at a time.
Yes, absolutely.
That is absolutely, this has truly been such a wonderful conversation. And it is like, we've talked about such hard things, but to me, I just feel so hopeful, and for everyone who's going to read this book and to listen to this episode, and, the reflection that comes with it, and the opportunity that comes with it after hearing a conversation like this. I know I feel so encouraged to be like, I'm just going to go start talking to people about all these things, because it is terrifying to pull that wet blanket and the armor off and to just say, this is where I am. But I feel truly like this type of conversation gives so many people the permission to do so. And truly, everyone out there, please, this book, it's not even a please go read it. Please go read it, but you should go read it. It was I loved every second of the read in terms of true entertainment, education, and it covers so many important things and gives so much room for empathy and curiosity, to your point. And it does such service to veterans and to children and their voices in a very truly page turning. I was completely into it the entire way. Excuse me, my voice.
Thank you.
So thank you for your work.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your work, because you are giving women a place to tell their truth and a place to practice their voice. So thank you for doing the work that you do. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. That fills my cup right up to the brim. Okay, where can people follow you? Where can they get this great book? How can they be part of the conversation? Give us all the things.
So they can find me and follow me on my website, beckyellis.net. There are links there to everything. And my book can be found at your independent bookstore. Hopefully they can order it if they don't carry it. Amazon, give me one sec. Any place books are sold, really.
Excellent.
It should be most of the places. So
yes. Yeah. Awesome.
And there are links on my website to that too.
Perfect. And we will link, I will absolutely link the book, the website, everything in the show notes so people can just scroll and click. But this feels like it has been such a wonderful conversation. I really, really appreciate your time. And I really appreciate the gift that you have given this world with your words. And I just truly, this has just filled my cup right up to the brim. Everyone, please share this episode, because I think this is such an important conversation for people to listen to be inspired, to grow more empathy, and for all the things that we've talked about. Go get the book, because I think you'll truly enjoy it. You'll certainly learn a lot and open your heart. And that's all I got. But Becky, thank you again. This has been an absolute pleasure. And thank you everyone for listening, and we will catch you next time. Well, that's the end of this episode, but promise me, you won't stop here with whatever it is you're feeling or dreaming about. I hope you leave today feeling empowered to live life just as you see fit. If this podcast was helpful to you, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on. I genuinely just want to help women live the life they dream about. So if this type of content tracks with you, subscribe to this podcast or visit our website, writeyourownsstory.co, to download digital courses or to grab a journal and a mug to just dream in and dream with. It's your life, lady. Do you? And just remember, I'm rooting for you, and you've totally got this.